Welcome to the show. I'm Chad, and today we are going to be talking about Suitor Armor, Volume 2. It is the second installment of the fan favorite Romantasy series that can be seen on Webtoon by the creator Purpah. I hope I said that correctly. So let's bring her in, make sure I said that right, and find out more about her and the book. Did I say that correctly?
Yes, you did. You're stellar.
Well, welcome to the show. Thanks for taking the time today to sit down and talk about your book. But before we do that, tell me a little bit about yourself as a comics reader and as a creator.
Well, I've always really enjoyed reading comics, but I never considered it as a career, really. I kind of fell into it more than anything. But I couldn't be happier anywhere else. I think it's a wonderful amalgamation of art and writing, which are two things that I really enjoy. And ever since I've got into it as a career, my appreciation for the art form has certainly skyrocketed. And now when I read my graphic novels, I sit there and I'm like, oh, was like a couple of years of someone's life. I can relate to this on a different level now.
So, did before doing your own stuff, did you read anything? Do you remember maybe the first thing you read or kind of triggered that you know I guess desire into you to create your own?
um, Most of the stuff I read was novels at first before because I wasn't big on comics because those are mostly like superheroes and stuff, which is not really my jam. But then I started stumbling more into other forms of illustrated stuff, and my friends introduced me to some manga, and I think what got me actually reading more online format stuff was Lore Olympus, because I saw ads for it everywhere, and that kind of got me into the online comic scene, and things like Lackadaisy as well, which is like specifically on online comic. Um, so I tried to kind of read and dabble in as many genres as I could, just to kind of see, because I think one of my favorite things about this is that varying from traditional comics to manga to graphic novels, is you have such a wide array of art forms, which is really nice. Because as much as I love diverse stories, I also really love diverse art styles to kind of meander through and enjoy. So I think I have quite a few comics on my bookshelf. I have Princess and the Dressmaker, Princess and the Grilled Cheese Sandwich. I'm realizing there's a lot of princess stories. Wide collection of things on my shelf right now.
So let's get into the book and the series. Tell us a little bit about the series as a whole, because this is the second volume. Give us an overview and kind of what inspired the story.
Yeah, so Suitor Armor is about a fairy in hiding amongst humans when there is a conflict amongst the Fae and humans. And she, upon arriving at the castle, meets and sort of develops a connection with an enchanted suit of armor named Modeus, who is not supposed to have a personality or be able to talk or think for himself. And it follows their connection in the various political intrigue and drama of the war and castle life. As for the original idea, the baseline idea came from a dream that I had, because I keep a dream journal next to my bed, and they're never super specific or anything like that. But it was basically just the premise of girl meets dark suit of armor, falls in love. And then I started adding things into the concept that I wanted to see more of, or that I just really enjoyed, because it started off more as a passion project than something that I was like, yes, this is meant to be consumed by everyone. At the time, it was just like, no, this is just to be consumed by me.
Mhm.
So kind of adding some more Fae lore and fantasy that at the time we were kind of like running dry on in terms, at least in mainstream media, because we were very much still at the tail end of like Avengers Endgame and stuff. So we were still very much in the superhero realm of things. And yeah, it just kind of became a snowball effect of me putting all the stuff that I really enjoy writing or drawing into one project, which is probably why it's like my main passion baby at the moment.
So let's kind of dig into the story. Who are the characters, and who are their antagonists, or what's the plot, and where does volume two, being volume two, I assumed obviously there's a volume one, so something had to happen prior to this book.
Yes.
Uh, is it something that people who pick up the book need to know what happened to volume one? Would it help, or
Um, yeah, definitely reading volume one will help. I think you'll be very confused. But the main group of characters is Lucia, who is the fairy in hiding. Modeus, who is the enchanted suit of armor that she meets, who was created by Norix, who is our court mage, sort of the morally gray character who's very popular as a result. Kiersey, who is the future queen and who Lucia is lady in waiting to. Kind of the interesting juxtaposition of their relationship is that Kiersey was raised to think, fairies are evil, they're the cause of all our problems and everything, without knowing the whole time that Lucia is a fairy, which kind of adds a layer of complexity because they love each other like sisters, but Lucia has to keep herself at, a distance somewhat, which does cause some tension in their relationship. And then going to the main castle, adds a whole another layer of danger for her as well. And then we have Raymond, who is the king that Kiersey is engaged to. Very jolly, bearded, redheaded guy who has good intentions, but definitely is still learning how to be a good king. And I am attempting to recall if my main villain appears in volume 2, because I kind of went an interesting route where I took a bit of time to introduce my main villain into the story, only because there was so much important setup to do with the other characters that I wanted to give it time to breathe and for people to get to know the characters as a result. And I think a lot of people expected Norix to turn into the main villain as a result, which I actually didn't have any problems with, because he was originally supposed to be the main villain in like draft 1 of this story. But I will introduce the evil weasel anyway. My main villain's name is Rickon, and he is just the epitome of everything bad in a scenario like this. Person in power who takes advantage of it. He doesn't seem to have any real motivations apart from his own amusement. And he doesn't have a plan necessarily so much as he just enjoys seeing what happens next, which makes him kind of an unpredictable beast. But as terrible as he is to write, he's also very fun to write in that sense, where because villains are always really entertaining to write and draw and everything. So, and then I've got a few side characters as well, like Baynard and Piers, which is a knight and a squire who become very close friends with Lucia and the main cast as well. And then some other characters that you meet down the line and stuff. So it grew into a very large group of people over time.
are there certain fantasy tropes that you are kind of exploring or putting your own spin on in the series?
I would like to think so. I think in a lot of Romantasy, there's sort of the pairing of the main couple, like big, strong guy, dainty little lady. And
Mhm.
I'm all for that, you know, and stuff like that. But I did kind of put my own spin on this, where it is definitely a big, strong man and a dainty little lady, but their personalities are, I would say, almost like swapped in a way, where he's sort of more the gentle giant type, even though he's this hulking suit of armor with horns and scars and stuff like that. And Lucia is the one who has a little bit more of a temper and can be a little bit broody at times.
Mhm.
So I kind of flipped the script on that. And in terms of like other like tropes, I can't really think any off the top of my head, only because when I made this story, I really, again, because I was making it for me, I don't think I really like thought of any tropes ahead of time. I'm sure
Yeah.
that there's some stuff that like falls into it.
No, I just kind of curious. So this originally appeared on Webtoon, am I correct?
Yes.
So this being I your first thing that you've written, uh, how was it kind of writing, learning to write for a web comic format, and did that kind of translate it differently when you were putting it together for the collected print edition?
Yeah. So because of the webtoon format, which is you know, episodic in nature, and then each episode is supposed to have at least a little bit of a cliffhanger to get people to go to the next one. Reformatting it, it was hard to pick where each volume would end, just because, you know, I didn't necessarily have endings in mind for the stopping points that we picked for each volume. Um, Luckily, because each episode ends on a cliffhanger a tiny bit, some more so than others, depending on the point in the story. There were some parts that stood out that made more sense for it to end. Um, I think that was the hardest part, was kind of figuring out how to slice things up for each volume, and to also make sure that they were like relatively like the same length as well. So it wasn't like super disjointed when they became physical copies. And Miranda Munt, who does Muted and Lovebot on Webtoon, was the one who actually reformatted the story from Webtoon scroll format to the, you know, traditional comic page turn format, which God bless them, because that is quite a task in and of itself. And with everything else I'm working on, I don't know if I would have been able to do half as good a job as they did. But yeah, it posed like an interesting challenge, just to kind of like figure out how to format it and to choose where to end in a physical sense when everything was in a scroll format. So very interesting experience it was,
Yeah.
but I think that they turned out really, really well.
So when you've written the story, and when you get to the art part of it, how do you work like hybrid, like part paper, traditional materials, and or did or or part digital, or just digital, or
um, the only time I do things traditionally or on like a different, like separate workspace, is when I'm in like the concept phase, because it lets me be a little bit like messier and not think too much about it, like control Zing every 2 seconds. Um, but apart from that, the whole process is pretty much digital. I work on Clip Studio Paint, and I have two lovely assistants that help me when we reach like the inking and then the color flatting.
Mhm.
It's an awesome program that allows for a lot of tools that just make life so much easier. And one of my assistants actually knows how to do some 3D models. So we actually have a 3D model of Modeus that we can drag into the comic, pose, and then I can draw over it. So I'm not trying to like structurally draw the suit of armor every time, which is what I did in season 1, and it was killer. I'm really glad I don't have to do that anymore. And they also made a model for my main villains. He's got a magical metal clawed prosthetic arm, so that's another thing that was modeled that we can just drag and drop in and pose and then trace over and stuff. So anything that's a little bit more complicated, We have assets for that to make it just that much easier. But yeah, it's all pretty much done digitally. It goes from scripting to thumbnailing, sketches, inks, colors, and then any final effects and backgrounds and whatnot that go in there as well. So it's become a pretty well-oiled machine at this point. I'm almost like, I am excited for my next project just because like Suitor Armor was very much a frying pan into the fire situation because I had never done comics before. And so I'm excited that like everything that I've learned on this is going to be applied moving forward to other things, which is just really exciting.
Now, is this a finite series that you're doing, or is it kind of an ongoing project that you're putting out on Webtoons and then we'll collect?
You mean Suitor Armor or what I'm
Suitor Armor, yeah.
Oh yeah, I have a ending all mapped out and ready to go. It's one of those projects that weirdly enough I knew what was going to happen every step of the way. I wish every story I worked on was like that because it came so naturally. Yep, so I know how it's going to end and stuff. And as like bittersweet as an ending is for a story, I'm also like really excited because I like the way everything ties together. Even though I know like an ending on pretty much anything will have like mixed reactions from an audience. So I hope people are at least somewhat satisfied with what I have to offer for that. But yeah, I've got it all. It's all pretty much mapped out and ready to go.
So I was looking at the art. I see a lot of manga influences in the art. Am I getting that feel correct, or what influences are you kind of going for, if any?
I would definitely say there is manga influence because I, read a bunch and I also watch anime and such. I think most of the influence came from the fact that I was originally attempting to enter TV animation as a character designer or a storyboard artist, like whatever I could get. So a lot of my art style kind of has a like TV animation look to it a little bit. Only recently have I started going like a little bit more illustrative with my stuff. I did like one freelance job for a show on Cartoon Network that was like uncredited and stuff. So a lot of influence came from the fact that like my art style was definitely catered more towards trying to get into that field. And then it slowly has been like taking influences from other things as I kind of learned to experiment a little more and push away from that origin. But I think it was a fun origin for my art to originate from because my story does tend to enter some like darker themes and topics. And I think a lot of people like originally when the series launched, they were like, oh, it looks so cute. It looks like Disney or something like that. And then I'd hit them with something really dark and they were like, what the hell? Which was really funny, not gonna lie.
Yeah. So that kind of, one of my, other questions I had, you said you kind of initially were writing this and doing this for yourself. And then how do you, obviously it's been well received. Are you surprised? Are you, obviously you're probably glad that it's being well received.
Yeah. I was definitely surprised because I was posting it on Webtoon Canvas at the time. And again, it was like every other week. It was a project just for myself. Had all the self-indulgent things that I really liked. Like, again, it was very much a comfort project while I was trying to find work in the animation industry. And so I was really surprised when when the following and the readership numbers went up like pretty rapidly. And then I got the offer from Webtoon to turn it into an original when I only posted 6 episodes on Canvas before I got that offer. And I was really shocked that it was just so well received. And I don't know if it was just because like at the time there wasn't like a particular brand of fantasy available, or maybe people were more enticed by the fact that I removed like all physicality from the romance because Modeus is a suit of armor, so it's a very untraditional romance where, they can't even kiss. So, I don't necessarily know like what aspect of it connected with people, because again, it was just something for me and everything I liked. But I guess other people also really enjoyed that stuff, and which is really comforting to know, because it makes me feel more confident going forward, writing more like fae and romance stuff and everything. So it's exciting.
On the writing side, do you have any like authors, on the fantasy slash, I guess, romance, spectrum of literature that, you kind of, you know, find inspiration in?
Yeah, some of my favorite authors, or some of my favorite books that are like on the top tier of my bookshelf, because I have cubbies dedicated to different book series and whatnot. I really enjoyed Shannon Hale's fantasy books. They're definitely geared towards a younger audience, but she takes fairy tales and does her own spin on them. And I always really enjoyed, like, she has Princess Academy and Goose Girl and Book of a Thousand Days, and I really always enjoyed those. And then as I started reading more advanced stuff, I really like Leah Bardot's like Six of Crows duology is one that I really enjoy. Obviously things like Lord of the Rings. I've never read Game of Thrones. I have the first book. I just have to find the time to read it. But I like kind of I like reading the adult fantasy, but I also like reading middle grade and YA fantasy as well, just because they have such different flavors, and I think that you can like sort of mix some aspects from them, like the wholesomeness from those middle grade fantasies mixed with like the complexities of the adults, or the heavier fantasy. But yeah, I have a lot of books, and I've been trying to branch out from only reading fantasy into reading some other stuff as well, because I don't want to box myself into one genre, both writing wise and like consumption wise, even though fantasy is my favorite.
Yeah. So coming into, this project, as a new creator, what was the most uh, challenging thing that you kind of had to learn to do or overcome, you know, that you've kind of over time, as you've done it more, you've gotten a lot, you know, more confident about doing?
I would say time management was a huge thing, just because a project like this does require a lot of art, a lot of writing, a lot of time, and burnout is such a danger in a job like this. I'm, and even now I'm still like battling it towards the end of a season and stuff like that. So that's something that I would say I've improved a lot on since season one. Um, but it's definitely something that comes with a job like this, that you just kind of have to learn how to manage, and it requires a lot of self discipline and I'm not very good at self discipline, at least not as like, I've gotten a lot better at it because of this. But it definitely is a hurdle. You become your own boss, essentially. You do answer to people you're turning things into, but when you're not talking with them via email or a phone call, you are responsible for yourself and the project through the rest of that time. And the other thing that's probably the hardest was, at the beginning of a project like this, I was all about reading the comments, because I wanted to see what people thought of episodes. I wanted to hear what people were saying. I have not entered the comment section for a few years now, and that was for my own mental sanity, but also because if I saw a suggestion or something that someone was upset with, I had a compulsion to try and fix it or put it into my story or change something to appease that one person. And that is such a dangerous, slope, a very slippery slope, because you're not going to be able to please everyone with your work. And I mean, obviously there's a difference between like taking criticism and improving your work, but then there's like reading comments and trying to please every single person in your audience, which just is an impossible task and will drive you insane. And as nice as it is to, you know, see those good comments, sometimes you'll see one that will just kind of like take the wind out of your sails. And, you know, it does affect you as a creator when people are talking about your work. So now, like, I think, yeah, my mom will screenshot really nice comments and then just send them to me. Like, she's my filter. And I'm like, oh, nice.
So what's the best advice that you've gotten since you started? Professional advice, not, you know, comments,
Yeah, yeah.
that you found the most helpful.
I think some of the best advice that I've gotten, because it's not something that you think of initially when you're working on a project like this. When it came to starting the project, the best advice I was given was literally just start it. I don't know what it was that necessarily made me take that advice and jump in, because I think it's really easy to get stuck in the planning stage of a story like this. You know, you want to get character turnarounds, you want to have every single thing planned out, and you can get stuck in that stage for so long and never put your work out, because no matter how well planned it is, your art is going to change over the course of a project like this. Your writing is going to change over the course of a project like this. It's just inevitable, because you're growing as an artist and as a writer. So it doesn't necessarily matter what starting point you're starting from. It's going to change no matter what. So there's really no point in trying to plan every single thing out. Just starting it. Obviously, you want to have, you know, some stuff ready to go, but just starting it and working through the story and letting yourself learn from it is probably the best advice I got, you know, or else you're going to be sitting on your hands throughout the entirety of it, and then it'll never see the light of day.
Yeah. And I guess a follow up to that be is, what advice do you know now that you would give, you know, yourself who was just, you know, starting out? Is that kind of the same type of advice you'd give yourself, or is there something else?
I would say if I was talking to myself, um, that is like a really good piece of advice. I would tell my past self starting this project that it is important to inhale just as much as it is to exhale. And what I mean by that is, like, I went to a talk someone gave about the creative process, saying that, you know, it's impossible to exhale or create forever without taking a breath and pausing and reading someone else's work or watching a movie or going out and going to a museum. That it's just as important to give yourself time to consume other people's work as it is to create your own, or else you're going to run out of fuel and burn out. And it's really easy, especially like at the beginning, I was so excited because things were going so well, is that I didn't give myself enough time to rest at certain intervals,
Hmm.
and to take inspiration from other people's work, because I was so locked into my own work and my own schedule, and I was pushing myself so hard. I remember when season 1 finally wrapped and I turned everything in, my body finally relaxed and I broke out into hives everywhere. And it was just my body finally relaxing, and then all this medical stuff came up and I was like, whoa.
Oh, I
So
hope you're
yeah,
better now.
yeah, yeah. I'm like, it's never gotten to that point ever again, but it's like, okay, we need to take better care of ourselves. So,
Mhm.
yeah, letting yourself breathe creatively, as well as, you know, even though you're sitting at a desk working on art or writing, it's just as important to take care of yourself physically as it is, you know, mentally. You know, like, you're not gonna. This is the machine that's putting out the artwork and the writing, and if you don't take care of it, your work isn't going to be as good as it could be. So,
Definitely. Is there anything else you'd like to mention about Volume 2 of Suitor Armor that maybe we didn't get to go over?
um, I would say that there is some stuff in it that is like my own. It gets a little bit more into fairy lore in my universe, which I'm honestly really proud of some of the stuff I came up with just because I hadn't seen it anywhere before. At least I'm sure someone else has done something similar. That's just the case with creativity and, writing and stuff. But this volume does get in a little bit more into the universe that I had created and ends at a really interesting point. And the bonus chapter carries over from the first bonus chapter in volume 1, and it continues to cover Piers and Baynard's story, because in the bonus chapter I decided to go over how they met. So that's something really, really fun that I'm excited to see people read.
Yeah, because I forgot to ask, were there any characters that maybe wrote one you didn't get a chance or haven't had a chance to expand on? It sounds like you have.
Yeah, well, that's the nice thing about the physical copies is that with these bonus chapters, I kind of get to tell extra stuff that I couldn't really fit into the main story without making it like more. Well, it's already pretty big, but just adding to it. So I'm excited that the bonus chapters allow me to kind of like put things in that didn't get to go into the original webtoon.
Well, as we, where can people find you and your stuff online if you are there? Obviously you're on Webtoon.
Yeah. So I go by the Purpah on pretty much all my socials, minus Instagram because of a username Flubub. So I'm Mel Pulse on there, but everything is like, I've got link trees on every single one. So if you find me on one, you can find me on all the others. I also stream on Twitch sometimes. I'll just stream artwork and stuff like that. But yeah.
Okay. Well, it was a pleasure chatting with you this afternoon. And Suitor Armor Volume 2 uh, goes on sale May 20th, which is, as of this recording, next week.
Woohoo!
So, best of luck as that takes off, and hopefully it does really well. And I'd love to have you back, when you're ready for Volume 3, or the final. The final installment of the story.
Yeah, I would love that.
All right, well, I'll let you go and have a good day, and it was a pleasure chatting with you.
Yeah, it was great chatting with you too.